Please welcome on stage, Mr. Tim Vine!
Good evening. As you can see, I walk with a distinctive gait. What an entrance. Come on, there's a lot hinging on this. Now, I don't want to lead you up the garden path. See that bottle of Evian? Watergate, come on. I'm on for 3 hours. Now, isn't it embarrassing when one of your fingernails grows much quicker than all the others? With me, it's that one. You know, I used to file my nails, and then I thought, what's the point of keeping them? So I caught this bus. Oh, one-liner. Now, exit signs, they're on the way out, aren't they? Black Beauty, he was a dark horse. Now, I've, not skip that. I've got a sponge front door. Hey, don't knock it. But I never sleep with fish. I'm halibut. See, I used to go out with this mackerel. When we split up, she was very upset. I said, look, there's plenty more men on the earth. What's your name? Adam. I'll make an... That's funny, because I don't know him from Adam. But I'll make a note of that mentally. Now, it's great there's so many of you who come here tonight. You know, I'm actually being stalked by a sumo wrestler. I've got a big following. Trying all the cameras. Pan left, pan left. Look at that, it's a picture of my headquarters. Now, hands up if you remember the Ayatollah. How many? A few hands going up. Don't worry, it's still comedy. Don't worry about it. Now, can you remember the last time you ate rice pudding? No, so you've got ambrosia. That's what that is. Do you know, I was driving here tonight. A policeman stopped me because one of my tyres was a bit flat. Luckily, I had a foot pump in the boot, so I knocked him out with that and drove off. And I got stuck behind a truck, and on the back of the truck it said, "Sheep, please be patient." And I thought that's understandable, because it must be really annoying if you're the driver, and every 5 minutes, "Are we nearly there yet?" So, I got this job in a garage, and little Bo Peep walked in. She said, "There's smoke coming out my bonnet." I said, "Your hair's on fire." She said, "When I drive my car, eggs shoot out the boot." I said, "I would do, it's a hatchback." I want you to imagine now, ladies and gentlemen, that I work in a jaundice clinic. Yellow. So I went to the doctors. This all happened today, by the way. I went to the doctors. I said, "I'm feeling a bit quincy." He said, "Don't you mean queasy?" I said, "We're talking about human lives." You see, I'm actually, I'm colourblind, but it doesn't stop me enjoying my life. No, last night I saw Joseph in his amazing brown coat. It was great. So I was working in this health food shop, and this bloke walks in. He said, "Evening, Primrose Oil." I said, "It's Mr. Vine to you." He said, "Saw your chunks." I said, "You shouldn't have been looking." He said, "Cellulite." I said, "How much do you want for it?" He said, "What I'm after is a great big packet of Alpen." I said, "I suppose you think that's a muesli." So I got this job at Burger King, and Andrew Lloyd Webber walked in. He said, "Give me 2 Whoppers." I said, "You're good looking, your musicals are great." Come on. And then Batman walked up to me, smashed a vase over my head, and he went, "Kapow." I said, "Don't you mean kapow?" He said, "No, I've got China in my hand." Quick impression, ladies and gentlemen, quick impression. That's Santa Claus in his early 20s. I know, how upsetting. Look at my tear ducts. Bobby Charlton's early 20s. Hey, look what I bought today. An elastic band. A bit of advice, if you've got an Islamic dog, Muslim. Quick impression. Lily Savage. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you invented Tipp-Ex. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure. Don't know who he is, but he's in his early 20s. So I was in this restaurant, and during the starter, the waiter came up to me, he got his little finger, and he just tapped me on the head like that, and then he walked off. Then during the main course, he came to me again, got his index finger, and he went like that, and then he walked away. Then during dessert, he came up to me, he got his thumb, and it went like that. And that's the difference, isn't it, between a good restaurant and a great restaurant. It's the little touches. And the waiter said to me, he said, "What do you want?" I said, "Give me something herby." He gave me a Volkswagen Beetle with no driver. So I was in the jungle, and I saw this monkey with a tin opener. I said, "You don't need a tin opener to peel a banana." He said, "I know, this is for the custard." And then this rabbit walked up to me. He said, "Someone's just chopped off one of my feet." I said, "That's lucky, isn't it?" He said, "I'm a male rabbit and I'm not moving." I said, "Oh, I see, the buck stops here." He said, "Are you looking at me? It was Rabbit De Niro." A bit more like Rabbit Bogart, really, but you know what I meant. So I looked round, and there was a partridge, a grouse, and a pheasant, all dressed as clowns. Game for a laugh, that's what it was. But I tell you what makes my blood boil: crematoriums. You see, I've always been very lazy. I've got a smoke alarm, it's got a snooze button. And I was going to write my will today, and I thought, no, life's too short. And I saw one of those motorbikes, it's got the roof that goes right over the top. Have you seen them? Have you seen those ones? Have you seen them? Yeah, thank goodness for that. It's, no, I couldn't believe it. I thought someone had hotwired a photo booth. So I was working in a travel agency, and this bloke walked in. He said, "I want to book a flight, very short notice." I said, "You've just missed it." He said, "I want to go somewhere hot and secluded, so I locked him in the photocopy room." Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the saddest paintings I have ever seen in my life. It may not look sad to you, but this was the scene half a second earlier. You see, today, you've got to have a hobby. Today I went shoplifting while balanced on the shoulders of a group of vampires. Yeah, I was done for theft on 4 counts. Mind you, people with guns who say, "Give me your money," you've got to hand it to them, yeah. Reminds me when I was a builder, you know, I was a terrible builder. The foreman said to me, he said, "Have you got a plumb line?" I said, "The one I normally use is, 'Hello, would you like a plumb?'" So I went to my GP, I said, GP, it's like Doctor, I've just updated it. I said, "I've just been hit on the head with a set of bongos." He said, "You've probably got slight percussion." He said, "You're turning into an airport." I said, "Is it terminal?" He said, "Antiseptic." I said, "I've got nothing against the Jews." Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a tape here. Hey, all right, pipe down. I've got a tape here that proves beyond any doubt that Elvis Presley used to share a 2-bedroom flat with Adolf Hitler. Have a listen to this.
Elvis, I fixed the shower.
Do you ever get that when... Do you ever get that when you're halfway through eating a horse and you think to yourself, I'm not as hungry as I thought I was? Well, I saw that film today, The Horse Whisperer, absolute rubbish, 3 hours long, Robert Redford going, the horse going, I can't even what you're saying. I've got a horse called Treacle, he's got golden stirrups. He doesn't go out much, he's a shy horse. That's 3 horse jokes on the trot. 4. So when the heck can I have a sip of your beer in all seriousness? Because it's all right, it's not a gag as such. Right. Look at the head on that beer. Oh, thanks very much for that. Oh dear. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the saddest paintings I've ever seen. It may not look sad to you, but this was the scene half a second earlier. So I went to the hair salon, my dad's sister walked in, spinning round in circles. I thought, oh my giddy aunt. She said, I want to buy some shampoo. I said, extra volume. She said, shampoo! So I said to this bloke, I said, I'm going to Buckingham Palace to do Prince Philip's hair. He said, have you got a permit? I said, no, I've just got to take a bit off the bag. I said, do you like my shirt? It's covered in pictures of cactuses. He said, cacti? I said, never mind my tie, what do you think of my shirt? So I went to the jewellers, and the sales assistant said to me, he said, can I help you? I said, necklace. He said, do you think I don't know? So I was playing the piano in a bar, and this elephant walked in. As I was playing, he started crying his eyes out. I said, do you recognise the tune? He said, no, I recognise the ivory. What do you mean, You think I've suddenly broken out of my act to tell you a trick? That was also a joke, don't worry. But, do you know, I went to the head office of the RSPCA. It's absolutely tiny. Yeah, you couldn't swing a cat in there. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a tape here that proves, beyond any doubt, that Larry Grayson used to share a 2-bedroom flat with Bernard Manning. Have a listen to this.
Oh, look at the back on me. Oh, shut that door. Is anyone's for a donut? Oh, look at the... Shut up, you bum.
You see, this is one of the happiest paintings. One of the happiest paintings I've ever seen in my life. It may not look happy to you, but this was the scene half a second later. That's nice, isn't it? See, today I had dinner with my boss and his wife, and it was a complete disaster. My boss's wife said to me, she said, Tim, how many potatoes would you like? I said, I just have one. She says, all right, you don't have to be polite. I said, all right then, I just have one, you stupid cow. So I went down to a local department store. I said, have you got any net curtains? He said, no, they've all got VAT on them. I said, that's gross. I said, I can't decide whether to buy this bed or not. He said, do you want to sleep on it? I said, of course I do. I said, how much is it? He said, $98.99. I said, make your mind up. But you know, my favourite party game is Blind Man's Buff. That's when you find someone who's blind and then you polish them. Do you ever go to McDonald's and when they say, do you want to eat it here or take it away? You say, I want to eat it here. And you eat your entire meal standing by the till. So I went to the supermarket, I said, there's hair on this meat. He said, let go of my leg. I said, I want a ring donut. He said, there's a phone in the corner. So I went to the off licence. I said, tenants? He said, no, we own the place. You see, I used to live in a teapot. I know what you're thinking, poor you. I was christened with a flamethrower. That was a baptism of fire, I tell you. And the vicar was wearing a gorilla suit, which was a blessing in disguise. But it was tragic what happened to him, because he was a Dutchman with inflatable shoes. And one day, he went for a run and he popped his clogs. So I bought this chess set and I ate it. It was horrible. I took it back to the shop. I said, that's stalemate. He said, are you sure? I said, checkmate. I said, I feel like an indecisive battery. He said, that was a negative. I I said, but I do. He said, are you sure? I said, I'm positive. I think you're ready for a song, ladies and gentlemen. You know, my favourite composer is Handel, who later teamed up with Hinge and Brackett to form the Doors. And I'm actually totally deaf, yeah. I never thought anyone would say that. This song, ladies and gentlemen, is about wax crayons. And so, Dave, please, hit the music, please. Wax crayons, here we go. Here we go. Down a bit, that's it. I'm not a wax crayon fan. I don't think they're easy to handle. When I've got one in my hand, it's like trying to write with a candle. Wax crayons. You can't draw tomatoes with the red one. Wax crayons. Never use the yellow one to sign a check. I'm not a wax crayon fan. I much prefer felt tips. When I chew a crayon, it gives me greasy lips. Wax crayons. No good for doing crosswords. Wax crayons. Never use one to draw a very thin line. Not a wax crayon fan, unless I use them for shading, or brass rubbing, or a fence post in a guinea pig's garden. Okay, we're having a little break now. I'm sorry, I'm just nick your beer. That's part of the break. I tell you what, you couldn't make this up, could you? Thanks. Let's hear it for Kat. There she is. I feel you just hit me in the face with a wet flannel. Has that made it better? There we are, look at that, look. Dry as a bone. That's right, if you chew a crayon, ladies and gentlemen, it gives you greasy lips. But of course, the same can be said for a kebab. But have you ever tried writing with a kebab? Sheesh. Oh, you have to throw it further than that if you want to hit me. So I went to a fancy dress party, dressed as sodium chloride, and I walked in, this bloke threw sulphuric acid on my head. It was terrible, I didn't know how to react. So I got home, I discovered a burglar pressing one of my shirts, so I punched him, because you've got to strike while the iron's hot. And then I saw this bloke chatting up a cheater. I thought he's trying to pull a fast one. So I said to this train driver, I said, I want to go to Paris. He said, you're a star. I said, I've been on telly, but I'm not Dean Martin. Mind you, at least Eurostar's comfortable. It's murder on Orient Express, isn't it? So I went down to a local gym. I said, Mr. Nasium, I said, can you teach me how to do the splits? He said, how flexible are you? I said, I can't make Tuesdays. But I tell you what I love doing more than anything, climbing into a small suitcase. I can hardly contain myself. So I went to this Indian restaurant. I thought, this smells familiar. Do you ever get that? Deja Vindaloo. And the waiter said to me, he said, curry okay? I said, I might do Summer Lover when I finish this. You know those trick candles that you blow out and a couple of seconds later they come alight again? Well, the other day there was a fire at the factory that makes them. So I went down to a local video shop. I said, can I take out the Elephant Man? He says, not your type. I said, can I have Batman Forever? He said, no, you've got to bring him back tomorrow. I said, what about another 48 hours? He said, tomorrow. I said, have you got Big Trouble in Little China? He said, no, I'm just wearing tight trousers. I said, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? He said, out. I said, Caddyshack? He said, I won't tell you again. Now, my favourite film was the Clint Eastwood classic, Unforgiven. Isn't that a great film? At the moment, they're working on a sequel. It's called Look, I Said I'm Sorry. But I didn't enjoy that film, Chocolat. I saw that, I didn't like. I just kept thinking to myself, where are the Oompa Loompas? Oh, I chose that one, is that all right? Yeah, had a bone to pick with him. So I met this gangster who pulls out the back of people's pants. It was Wedgie Cray. So I went down to a local quarry. I said, that's a big rock. He said, boulder. I said, no, that's a big rock. So Robin Hood walked up to me. I said, where'd you keep your arrows? He said, in a quiver. I said, where'd you keep your arrows? He said, do you want a game of darts? I said, all right then. I said, nearest of all darts. He said, bah. I said, He said, you're closest. You see, I'm against hunting. In fact, I'm a hunt saboteur. Yeah, I go out the night before and shoot the fox. And the other day, I sent my girlfriend a huge pile of snow, and then I rang her up. I said, did you get my drift? So I went down to a local supermarket. I said, I want to make a complaint. I said, this vinegar's got lumps in it. He said, those are pickled onions. So I bought some Armageddon cheese. And on the packet, it said, best before end. So I got home, there was a dead chicken flying around my house. I rang up the vicar. I said, get here quick, I've got a poultrygeist. So I went to a Chinese restaurant. I said, these noodles are a bit crunchy. He said, you're eating the chopsticks. I said, waiter, there are 2 ears in my soup. He said... And I see the price of hearing aids has gone up. Yeah, deaf people all around the country are going, how much? So I ordered, and this duck walked up to me and he gave me a red rose. He said, your eyes sparkle like diamonds. I said, waiter, I asked for aromatic duck. But you know, I'm in a great mood today because the other day I entered a competition and I won a year's supply of Marmite. Yeah, 1 jar. Did you know if a stick insect lays his eggs in a jar of Bovril, it will give birth to a litter of twiglets? And this bloke said to me, he said, can I come into your house and talk to you about your carpets? I thought, that's all I need, a Jehovah's Witness. You see, my next door neighbour worships exhaust pipes. He's a Catholic converter. So I rang up British Telecom. I said, I want to report a nuisance phone call. He said, not you again. And I was having dinner with chess champion Gary Kasparov, and we had a black and white check tablecloth. It took him 2 hours past me salt. He said, you remind me of a pepper pot. I said, I'll take that as a compliment. So I said to this acrobat, I said, have you got any winter pepper? He said, no. I said, summer salt. Did you know all male tennis players are witches? For example, Goran, even he's a witch. And I've got a friend who's fallen in love with 2 school bags. He's bisexual. So I was in Tesco's and I saw this man and woman wrapped in a barcode. I said, are you 2 an item? So I was reading my newspaper, I was reading the obituary column. It said, Mars bar, packet of Rolos, double-decker. Then I realised, in fact, I was reading the obituary column. It said, a lorry load of tortoises crashed into a train load of terrapins. I thought, that's a total disaster. And this aeroplane was filled with... I've done that one, total disaster. I'll do it twice. Black Beauty was a dark horse. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a tape here that proves beyond any doubt that Keith Richards used to share a 2-bedroom flat with Sweep. Have a listen to this.
Oi, it's your turn to get the milk.
So I was in this airport and I said to this woman, I said, she said, no sir, this is the check-in desk. So I went down to the local mirror shop. I said, I want to buy a mirror, you blonde, lanky idiot. He said, I'm over here, sir. So I was on the aeroplane, the bloke sat next to me, looked exactly like me. I said, what's your name? He said, Tim Vine. I was beside myself. So I went to the watch shop. I said, I want to buy a watch. He said, analog. I said, no, just a watch. So I was taking the M4 out of London, and this bloke said, put it back. And I passed this man who was playing Dancing Queen on the didgeridoo. And I thought, that's Aboriginal. You see, believe it or not, there are twice as many eyebrows in the world as there are people. And I've got... You were nodding there, that's absolutely right. Not really. I'll say you're ticking them off whether they're true or not. Right, okay. Well, that isn't strictly true because some people have got no eyebrows and some people have only got one. Anyway, this is not comedy, so I'll crack on with my act. Do you know, I got this for my birthday. I took it back to the shop. I said, it's too small. He said, all mug stands are the same size. I said, mug stand? I've been hanging my coat on it. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for another song. Isn't it? Do you want another song? Yeah. Why not? And then after this song, I'll have another dab down. Right, so this song is called Deep, ladies and gentlemen. When I go like this, I want you to go deep. Let's try that now. Deep, deep. Here we go. Hit the music, please, Dave. Here we go. I only know the one dance. Deep, very deep, very deep, very deep. The ocean is deep, much deeper than you think. Deep, very deep, very deep, very deep. The ocean is deep, much deeper than you think. Ask a mackerel and he say, deep. Ask a dolphin and he say, deep. Ask a blue whale and he say, deep. Ask all the shrimps and they'll all repeat, it's very deep, very deep, very deep. The ocean is much than you think. Deep, very deep, very deep, very deep. The ocean is much than you think. Ask a starfish and he say, deep. Ask a walrus and he say, no. Ask a great butt and he say, ask all the prawns and they'll all repeat, it's very, very, ooh. The ocean is much than you think. Deep, than you deep, thicker than you, the ocean is. It's finished, give yourselves a round of applause. Oh, if anyone's about to die, I'm just going to have a little look, actually. I haven't left anything out because I've been booked to tell, 9,000. Talk amongst yourselves, we'll start again in just a second. If I don't find where I lost my place, we will start again. I remember saying something about, oh, I see, yeah. Oh, that's all right. Oh, we hardly missed anything out. All right. Tell you what, it was a treat. I'll add some more. Oh, do you know, I was in this bar in America, and my left knee started going like that. Man, what a crazy joint. Then this Alka-Seltzer pill came up to me. He said, I bet you can't make me laugh. So I threw a cup of water over him, and he just dissolved. I've got a cat called Minton, yeah, and when he eats shuttlecocks, I say, badminton. See someone taking pictures there? Do you like photography? Yeah, snap. Come on, let's just see what develops. Don't be negative. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. All right, come on, focus. I get the picture. Now, pop idol, pop idol, pop idol, pop idol, pop idol, pop idol, pop idol. Do you know, a long time ago, I said to my father, I said, I want to be a comedian. He said, well, practice in the bath. So I did, now I am one. He gave the same advice to my brother, but unfortunately, he wanted to be an electrician. So one of the doctors, I said, I'm scared of lapels. He said, he got cholera. I said, the older I get, the more I spread gossip. He said, that's rheumatism. I said, last night while I was asleep, I dreamt I was eating a large marshmallow. He said, don't tell me. When you woke up, your pillow was gone. I said, no. When I woke up, one of my large marshmallows was missing. So I walked out, and I was surrounded by protractors on motorbikes. It was hell's angles. And I said to this bloke, I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I sell manure. I said, I bet you're rolling in it. So I opened the front door when Dad was in the middle of fixing it, and he flew off the handle. And I went to a therapy group to help me cope with loneliness, and no one else turned up. At a birthday party, there were so few people there, we had to play Keep the Parcel. So I went to the barber's. He said, do you want a crew cut? I said, no, it's only me. I said, have you got any Brill cream? He said, it's not that good. I said, give me a ponytail. He said, once upon a time, this pony went to the seaside. You see, today I met the bloke who invented crosswords. I can't remember his name. It was P something, T something, something. And I was playing tennis, and this 30-foot bicycle went past. I thought, that's a long rally. And I was halfway up this mountain, and this bloke started attacking me. I said, what are you doing? He said, I don't like your altitude. And then all these cows started falling over and scraping their knees. I said, what's up with them? He said, they're grazing. And this bloke said to me, he said, are you in favour of arranged marriages? And I said, yes, I am. Because I've been to a marriage that wasn't arranged, it was chaos. this car wash and I started foaming at the mouth. I thought, I'm not having this, so I cycled out again. And I went to a 4-star hotel. All the rooms are full of petrol. And the receptionist said to me, she said, have you got a reservation? And I said, yes, I'm worried about the price. I said, can you give me an early morning call? She said, cock-a-doodle-doo. I said, very good. So I went down to a local petrol station. There was nothing coming out of my nozzle. So I walked in. I said, have you got your pumps on? He said, no, I'm wearing flip-flops. I said, super unleaded. He said, it is good, isn't it? And then this bloke came in like that. I thought, he's running a bit low. So I went down to a local beach, and there was a young boy swimming on his own. So I threw him a pair of binoculars. He said, what are these for? I said, you need supervision. Come on! So I went down to a local shop. I said, I'm looking for a sailor with one arm. He says, not me, I'm a wholesaler. He said, what do you think of voluntary work? I said, I wouldn't do it if you paid me. So I was on this boat, and this bloke went past like that. I said, who are you? He said, I'm a skipper. And then all these bits of lamb started floating by. I thought, God, it's getting choppy. I said, I'm going to the back of the boat. He said, stern. I said, I'm going to the back of the boat. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for possibly another quick impression for you here. Quick impression as the world's smallest flamenco dancer. Now a stunt involving a tennis racket. Haven't got the guts. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for me to play something on the guitar, so I want you to give a big round of applause, please, for the guitar, and please keep clapping until I'm in position. Let's hear it for the guitar! Won't take you so long. I'd like to start by singing an old favourite. Red Rum. This next song is called Subtraction. Take it away. This next song is dedicated to a friend of mine whose lips protrude 2 feet out from his face. The shadow of your smile is huge. My mother speaks like this. My father speaks like this. So I speak like this. Which can be rather embarrassing. Now, this song I'm going to do now is called Family Holidays, and it's about family holidays and what an absolute scream they are. Now, can I just ask you, what's your name? Stuart. Last family holiday you went on, Stuart, where did you go? France. France? Ah, whereabouts?
South of France.
Paris, you say? Okay, I'm going to carry on, shut up. So, do you know, whenever I get into bed, I always think of France because my bed springs go Dordogne. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the song, and it involves your help in the chorus. This is how the chorus goes. It goes like this. Ha 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 ha. Always makes me laugh. Let's all try that together. Here we go. Ha 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 ha. Always makes me laugh. Family holidays. Family holidays used to be so funny. When I remember them, it always makes me laugh. Ha 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 ha. Always makes me laugh. Like the time when we spent a fortnight in France. My dad bought a beret and he wore it all the time. Ha 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 ha. Always makes me laugh. Like the time when we ordered drinks by the pool, and when they arrived, they were completely the wrong ones. Ha 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 ha. always makes me laugh. Like the time my uncle fell asleep on the beach. He didn't wake up till the tide was round his waist. We threw him a rope but it was out of his reach. The current swept him out and we never saw him again. Ha 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 ha. Always makes me laugh. There we are. Yes, a little bit of fashion advice for you, ladies and gentlemen. Never plait your Mohican. I found my thrill. Platts Domino. There he is. So I was in this pub. I drank a bottle of wine, lost my Filofax, and I got arrested for being drunk and disorganised. And the policeman said, get in the back of the van. So I got in, and there was this freezer full of chalk ices and a machine called Mr. Whippy. He said, not that van. So I went to the doctor's. I said, I've got a rash. He said, I'll be as quick as I can. I said, I've got a heart complaint. He said, murmur. I said, I've got a heart complaint. So I was reading this book called The History of Glue, and I couldn't put it down. You see, I was born and bred in a bakery and raised in an oven. We even had a pantry. It was a tree covered in pants. And I met this teenage goat, and he had a human chin, because that's quite fashionable for goats. I said, I see you've grown a blokey. So, I went down to a local electrical shop. I said, I'd like someone to sell me a kettle. He said, Kenwood. I said, where is he? So I took my dogs to the vet. No way clear for me, thanks. I took my dogs to the vet. Oh, it's a mic. Sorry. I took my dogs to the vet. We can edit that out. Either that, keep it in and put a laugh on it. I don't know. We'll decide later. Do you know, I went to the... where was I going? A pet shop? Are you just laughing in the gaps to humour me? Where was it? Pet shop. I went to the pet shop. I said, give me a goldfish. He said, do you want an aquarium? I said, I don't care what star sign he is. I said, that can't be right. I said, I don't know whether to give my dog a tin of pedigree chum or give him a bone. He said, what's the name of your dog? I said, Knick Knack Paddywhack. So I was playing golf with my next door neighbour. After 18 holes, our scores were still level. I said, sudden death. He said, all right, so I shot him. So I went down to a local shoe shop. I said, I want my shoes fixed. He said, Sol. I said, I want my shoes fixed. Now, apparently, if you dangle a needle over a pregnant woman's stomach and it goes round and round like that, it means she can have a girl. And if it goes side to side like that, it means she can have a boy. And if it gets pulled downwards, it means she can have a magnet. And this midwife said to me, she said, Tim, have you ever been present at the birth of a baby? I said, yes, once. She said, what was it like? I said, it was dark, then suddenly very light. So I said to this barn owl, I said, I've just got engaged. He said, you twit to who? I said, it's this girl called Ina. Every time I see her, I say, hi, Ina, and she laughs her head off. And I saw this sign, it said hairdressing for men. I walked in, there was a rabbit trying on clothes, and all these blokes going, yeah, very nice. You see, last night, I put everything I owned onto one horse, and it squashed it. So I went down to a local casino. I said, my girlfriend's just fallen asleep in the middle of a game of cards. He said, poker. I said, good idea. He said, do you fancy a game of solitaire? I said, all right then, and he walked off. And this policeman came up to me and he gave me a thin piece of paper and a pencil. I said, what's that for? He said, I want you to help me trace someone. And then a really handsome bloke sprinted past and I thought, he's dashing. And there was this bloke lying on the ground, snogging a shrimp. I said, what are you doing? He said, I think I pulled a muscle. So I was standing on my window ledge, 6 floors up, looking down at the traffic. I thought, one slip now, and it's curtains for me. If I fall the other way, I'm going to die. Rows 1 to 3 ahead of me there. Yes, look at that. Ratatouille. My impression, ladies and gentlemen, of two rats who've swallowed a flock of seagulls. Two rats who've swallowed a flock of seagulls. But first of all, look at that. That's a rat standing on a mirror. And that's a rat with a mirror on his head. Thank you very much, you're absolutely right. That, in fact, is a rat with a mirror on his head. And that's what I should have said on reflection. My impression of two rats who've swallowed a flock of seagulls. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for something a little bit different. It is in time, in fact, for, incidentally, out of interest, just ask you, what do you do for a living? You're a market researcher. Ah. Let's say, for argument's sake, you're a butcher. I went to the butcher's. It's easy, this ad-libbing, isn't it? I went to the butcher's. He said, I bet you £10 you can't reach those 2 bits of meat. I said, I'm not betting. He said, why not? I said, the stakes are too high. So tell me, how long have you been researching markets for? 10 years?
Yep.
Wow, and you enjoy it, do you?
Yeah.
Wow. Does it affect hearing?
Sorry, second.
I said, does it affect your hearing? Oh, that's my favourite bit of my act. Now, I use the term accent loosely. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for bread golf. Let's hear it, please, for the bread. Let's hear it. And let's also hear it, please, for the club. Countdown from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, I sliced it. You're interested? That's a sandwich. It's not actually, it's a 7-iron, but what's so funny about a 7-iron? What's so funny about a sandwich? Thanks very much for that. Vincent van Reindeer. Now, my impression of a pigeon hoovering. What? Mind your feet. Do you know, apparently 1 in 5 people in the world are Chinese, and there's 5 people in my family, so it must be one of them. It's either my mum or my dad or my older brother Colin or my younger brother Hotato. I think it's Colin. But I always get very emotional when I go to weddings. Last wedding I went to, I cried my eyes out. It was when the vicar said, I'm afraid she hasn't turned up, Tim. So I went to the cinema, I saw a very sad film, and the bloke behind me suddenly started wailing. I got hit in the back of the head with the harpoon. And my girlfriend got in the car and her tights ripped, so I gave her the fan belt. She said, what's your favourite chat-up line? I said, 0898 11223. So I was in my car, I was driving along, and my boss rang up. He said he'd been promoted, and I swerved. Then he rang up a second time. He said he'd been promoted again. I swerved again. He rang up a third time. He said, you're managing director. And I went into a tree. And the policeman came up and said, what happened to you? I said, I careered off the road. He said, I'm going to chop off the bottom of one of your trouser legs and put it in a library. I thought, that's a turn up for the books. And the back of his anorak was leaping up and down like that, and people were chucking money to him. I said, do you earn a living doing that? He said, yes, this is my livelihood. So I was getting into my car. This bloke said to me, he said, can you give me a lift? I said, sure, you look great, the world's your oyster. Go for it. See, somebody actually complimented me on my driving today. They left a little note on the windscreen. They said, parking fine. That was nice. So I went down to a local ice cream shop. I said, I want to buy an ice cream. He said, hundreds and thousands. I said, we'll start with one. He said, Knickerbocker Glory. I said, I do get a certain amount of freedom in these trousers, yes. He said, Tutti Frutti. I said, not so bad yourself, Tiger. He said, Banana Dreamboat. I said, all right, pack it in. I said, I want to buy a tent. He said, 2 camp. I said, sorry, I want to buy a tent. I said, also, I want to buy a caravan. He said, camper. I said, make your mind up. I said, can you sell me a piece of wire? He said, flex. I said, can you sell me a piece of wire? I said, I want one of those chairs that goes back. He said, reclining? I said, give me one of those chairs. He said, where are you going to put it? I said, lounge. He said, where are you going to put it? So I went to a dentist. He said, say R. I said, why? He said, my dog's died. Now, most dentist chairs go up and down. The one that I was in was going backwards and forwards. I thought, this is unusual. And the dentist said, Mr. Vine, get out the filing cabinet. But it's strange, isn't it? You stand in the middle of a library and go, ah! And everyone stares at you. Do the same thing on an aeroplane, everyone joins in. So I was on this aeroplane. In fact, I was playing football on the aeroplane. That's the key bit of the joke. If I left that out, it'd make no sense at all. I was playing football on this aeroplane. It was amazing. I was running up the wing. Let's try that without the football bit. I was on this aeroplane, running up the wing. Pointless. Now then, look at this, look. I'm gonna get you. Not very scary like that, but watch the same effect with the lights off. Oh, right, someone wants to put some more. Let's hear it again for Kat. She wants to put some dab me. Oh, that's. Oh, thanks, yeah. Blimey, what's happened to your hand, Kat? It's a clever trick if you can do it, don't you? Thanks. Oh, you're a dab hand at this. I'm on water because I'm on a special diet, you see. I only eat things with the word special in it. Special K, special fried rice. And of course, Marks and Spencer's strawberry cream sponge cake. Special offer. Oh, she's gone. Watch. Pardon? Push my hair back. Right, is that the way you prefer it, is it? That's ruining that shot, is it? Must be flipping over quite a lot. It's in his. Yeah. Thanks, Len. That's Len. Len Scap. I said to my German friend, I said, is that better now, Len, for you? Have you got a better shot of the audience now? Push my, is that better? Push my hair back now? That's great, right, lovely. Hey? Well, I'm not free then, no. I said to my German, good evening. I said to my German friend, I said, why have you got a piece of meat in the boot of your car? He said, that is my spare wheel. And I've got a German anti-aircraft gun. She gives me a lot of flack, that woman. So I was in Gibraltar, I said, give me a whiskey. He said, on the rocks. I was going to have it here. He said, do you drink it neat? I said, yes. He said, well, tuck your shirt in. And he gave me a pint of gravel. I said, what's that? He said, one for the road. You know, I was walking down the street, this woman stopped me. She said, excuse me, have you just washed your face with Imperial leather soap? I said, yeah, can you smell it? She said, no, you got the little label on your forehead. You see, you can't get Dairy Lee triangles in Bermuda. And I bought some Bermuda shorts, and when I took them off, my pants had vanished. Talking of drugs, if you take too much LDS, you get dyslexia, so be careful. But you know, a lot's gone wrong for me this week. The first thing was my girlfriend got run over by a bus. Thank you for that. But you're right, like I said earlier, they are still jokes. So, I mean, that wasn't the punchline, but nonetheless. My girlfriend, she got run over by a bus. Oh, okay. And then the second thing was I lost my job at the bus company. Now. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a tape here that proves beyond any doubt that I live on my own. Have a listen to this.
I've just put the kettle on. Does anyone else want a cup of tea?
You know, sometimes you walk into a shop, you hear this, don't you? Morning, I'd like to buy a bell. I'm sorry, I don't sell bells. Right then, bye. My impression of a sarcastic town crier. Oh, yeah. And now my impression of the world's most impatient man. If I can find the wig. Where's the flipping wig? Oh, forget it. Bit of advice, ladies and gentlemen. Never eat candy floss on a roller coaster. Mrs. Slocum in Quicksand. There we are. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it could be time. It could be time for another song. Are you up for another song? Here's a little song for you, ladies and gentlemen, which is about the box. Here we go. I used to have a box. I used to have a box. And I didn't know what was in it. I used to have a box. I used to have a box. And I didn't know what was in it. One day I picked it up. One day I picked it up. And I didn't know what was in it. Then I shook it some. Then I shook it some. And I didn't know what was in it. If you have got a box, if you have got a box, and you don't know what is in it, just give your box away. Just give your box away. Then you can join with me and say, I used to have a box. I used to have a box. And I didn't know what was in. Let's all sing it together like Butlins. Here we go. I used to have a box. That's freaked me out. No one ever joins in with that. I used to have a box. And I didn't know what was in it. You know, you can't get a job as an airline pilot if your name is Jack, because you walk into the cockpit, the co-pilot says, "Hi, Jack," and everyone starts screaming. You also can't get a job as an airline pilot if your name is Ivor Hand Grenade. And I spent the whole of today at the filming of a Sugar Puffs advert, and it's always fascinated me who is the actor who plays Honey Monster. So during filming, I ran forwards, got Honey Monster in a headlock, ripped his mask off, and it was Bungle from Rainbow. So I went down to the local garden centre. I said, I want to buy a garden. He said, we don't sell gardens, we sell things that are in gardens. I said, all right, I have a path. She said, would you like anything else? I said, a little hyacinth. She said, would you like anything else? I said, crocus. She said, rrr. So I rang up my local Ramblers Club, and this bloke went on and on. Because you know when you're in love, you get that tingly feeling all over your body. Well, that's led to me having 2 disastrous relationships with an electric fence and a cattle prod. And the first time I went out with my girlfriend, we went like this. Then we started getting steady. Remember once we had a candle-lit dinner, so everything was undercooked. You see, my dog's not very intelligent. He only understands 2 words, sit and profitability. And it took me ages to teach him to sit. For a long time, he was running a small business standing up. And he always misinterprets things that I say to him. I say, heal! And he goes down to the local hospital and does what he can. So I got home. He was sitting on the sofa. I said, get down. He started dancing. You see, there's a woman I work with. She went abroad and caught malaria, and she got 3 months off work. And none of us like her very much anyway, so we've been ringing her up. And she picks up the phone and goes, hello, Linda speaking. And we go... So I was at home today, leaning over the saucepan, stirring the food with my head. And my dad walked in, he said, you'll never get married if you're out like that. I said, I know, I'll always be a spatula. I said, I was in a cross-country run today. He said, what position did you finish in? I said... I said, can you copy a cassette for me? He said, sure. So I went down to a local hat shop. I said, I want to buy a hat for the winter. He said, bobble. I said, I want to buy a hat for the winter. I said, I also want to buy a jumper. He said, roll neck. I said, give me that jumper. So I went to the fairground. I said, have you got a Big Dipper? He said, please. I said, coconut shy. He said, put it like this, they don't go out much. So I went to the tarot card reader. Hey? Yeah, about halfway. I went to the tarot card reader. I said, it's my birthday today. Can you tell me what the cards say? He said, sure. To Tim, happy birthday, love from Granny. And the roller coaster was stuck upside down, and there were all these people hanging upside down with their hair standing on end. So I shouted up at them, you lot look really silly with your hair standing on end. And it came back round again, and they're all Mohicans. They beat me up. And I had to go on one of those stools where you shoot a duck over and you get a prize. And I noticed if you aim the gun at the bloke who runs the stool, you get all the prizes. You see, the trouble with ghost trains is that this is supposed to be scary. Which it isn't. I think it would be much scarier if halfway round they stopped in pitch darkness and you heard a glugging sound, followed by a strong smell of petrol. So I left the fairground and I was beaten up by a local gang called the Hokey Cokey Gang. And they all held hands and surrounded me. Then they put the left leg in and the left leg out, and they went in, out, and they shook me all about. And every time I went, oh, they went the hokey cokey. And I thought, so that's what it's all about. You see, I've been living with a woman for some time. She's quite a bit older than me, we don't get on. It's my mum. She said, I'm going to dig a hole in the ground and fill it with water. I thought she means well. I said, I'm going to buy a theatre. She said, are you having me on? I said, I'll give an audition, but I can't promise. I said, I've just got a job in a bowling alley. She said, 10 pin. I said, no, it's a permanent job. Then she collapsed on the floor, so I rang up the hospital and said, my mum's collapsed. He said, do you want a stretcher? I said, make her feel worse. He said, what happened? I said, a row of books fell off the wall and landed on her head. He said, you've only got yourself to blame. Remember the first thing my mum said to me when I was born? She said, I was expecting you. And when I left home, she said, don't forget to write. I thought it was a bit unlikely. It's a basic skills now. And my dad's liver is inside his left knee, his kidneys are on his elbows, and his spleen's on the side of his head. Still, his heart's in the right place. But you know, my father is a soldier. He's not a real soldier. He's a thin strip of buttered toast. But the unluckiest person in my family is my uncle. 2 weeks after he went blind, his guide dog went deaf. Now, you might have noticed when I walked on, I have a very slight twitch on my hand. It's only very small. Look, there it is. I go through life, it doesn't affect me at all. The only time it affects me is when I'm trying to get exactly 10 pounds of petrol in my car. £9.98, £9.99, £10.04. And have you noticed, people who have speech impediments always have the letter they can't pronounce in their name. Jonathan Wass, Frith Eubank, and a friend of mine who can't stop going. He's been very unlucky because his name is. And I went to school with a bloke who had 2 arms, 2 legs, but no head. And it was very strange when he did cartwheels, because you could never tell when he'd finished. Make up. Have I fallen out with someone? Oh. Let's hear it again for Cat. Oh. I know what you're thinking, ladies and gentlemen. And the answer to the question is quite a bit. No, I mean, I'll let you all out. I've been on over an hour now, haven't I? No, I should have gone quicker, really, because there's so much stuff still left to do. Does anyone got any questions, particularly? No. Now, out of interest, you look like a man who's probably got an interesting job. What's your job?
I work at TGI Fridays.
You work at TGI Fridays? Wow. Okay, can't use that, advertising. And you presume you're some sort of rancher or something, are you? This reminds me of a joke of a cowboy that went into a German car sales, what do you call it, sales room? Sales room, do you call it? Yeah. And he walked in and he said, "Howdy." Cheers. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fantastic audience. And here comes the rest of my act. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, I can't stop gambling. He said, you want Gamblers Anonymous? I said, you probably aren't, I'm so drunk, know where I am. So one of the doctors, he said, you've got hypochondria. I said, not that as well. I said, that tastes of apples, that tastes of pears, and that tastes of gooseberries. He said, you got fruit gums. I said, Doctor, I've just swallowed a Robin Reliant, what shall I do? He said, take it easy on corners. I said, Doctor, I feel as if the whole world is ganging up on me. He said, hang on a minute. Hey, lads, in here. You see, I went blind recently and had to go to a Braille optician's. And I had to fill these huge Braille letters on the wall, and they got smaller and smaller. And when I got to the bottom, I said, I can't read that line. He said, I'm sorry, I'm afraid you're going to have to wear gloves. Now, what I'm going to ask you now, what's your name? Graham, how are you? Graham, I want you to give me a subject, any subject to one. I'll make up a joke off the top of my head with the subject you give me. Make it as obscure as possible. Away you go.
Bakers.
How did you throw your voice back there? Ventriloquist, extraordinary. Have you seen the new ventriloquist websites on Gubbly 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 Got? What, bakers, you say, Graham?
Yeah.
Bakers. And an unusual, a famous person you wouldn't expect to find in the bakers? Who would you not expect to find in the bakers?
Winston Churchill.
You've done it again, amazing. We're lower this time. A baker's Winston Churchill. No, hang on, what did you say? You didn't say Winston Churchill, back here. What did you say?
Crippen.
Crippen! Oh, right, of course. Who's Crippen? Wasn't that a rabbit on children's TV? What was Scrooge Crippen? Is he a serial killer? Oh, okay, right. That's good. Lift the mood. That's it. So we're having Crippen in a baker's and another unusual object you wouldn't expect to find in a baker's. Anything at all.
Garden shears.
Garden shears. Well done. No clue earlier for that. Ladies and gentlemen, as provided by Graham here, garden shears in a baker's with Crippen. A joke off the top of my head for you, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go, off the top of my head. So I went to the baker's, and there, standing with a pair of garden shears, was serial killer Crippen. And he was standing there snipping through the top of an ice finger. And I said to him, have you bought that? And he said, yes, I have actually, and I'm free to do whatever I like. And then suddenly I looked at his face and it began to revolve. His face began to revolve, like in this plane like this. And it was flashing as well, flashing a kind of orangey light. And he was making this noise. And he lifted up the ice finger and he said, catch this! He threw it up in the air and it landed on the top of his shears. Suddenly the whole bakery exploded and out came Crippen's whole family running towards me, holding shears as well, but packets of felt tips sellotaped to the handle. And as they ran towards me, they went, bakery, bakery, bakery. And there's a big, give me another subject. Oh, come on, that's impossible. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to reassure you, I don't do jokes about graphic designers. I draw the line at that. I don't do jokes about Spain. No way, Jose. I don't do jokes about an elephant who's packed his trunk and left the circus. Not on your Nelly. And I don't do jokes about the verb to jump out and scare someone. That's taboo. I don't do jokes about a wooden step in the corner of the field that doesn't belong to me. That's not my style. I went down to a local music shop. I said, can you teach me how to read music? He said, why? I said, because I keep pronouncing it music. I said, I want to buy a violin. He said, do you want a bow as well? I said, don't bother wrapping it. I said, I want something that goes ping. He said, ping. I said, you'll do. I said, let me hear your guitar. He said, You see, I'm actually a reverse vegetarian. Yeah, I don't eat leather, but when I go out, I wear corned beef shoes. And when I woke up this morning, I threw back my haddock skin duvet, put on my pilchard head slippers, splashed on a bit of cod liver oil aftershave, drew back the smoke kipper curtains. And I thought, life stinks. And this bloke said to me, he said, what do you think of CFCs? I said, you're better off with O-levels. He said, what do you think about the problems with the ozone? I said, it doesn't affect me because I always get a travel card. So I got home, the phone was ringing, I picked it up, I said, who's speaking, please? And the voice said, you are. So I rang up the local swimming baths. I said, is that the local swimming baths? He said, it depends where you're calling from. I said, have you got a diving board? He said, yes. I said, is it safe to use? He said, no. I said, why not? He says, it's in the car park. Which is funny when you say it in a sentence form. Now then. I said, how deep's your deep end? He said, 6 foot. I said, how deep's your shallow end? He said, 8 foot. I said, how can you have a deep end that's 6 foot deep and a shallow end that's 8 foot deep? He said, the deep end's only half full. I don't fully understand that one myself, to be honest. So I rang up a local building firm. I said, I want to skip outside my house. He said, I'm not stopping you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been great. I'll leave you with this. Well, I didn't bring it with me. I'm going to leave you with a song, ladies and gentlemen. It involves a ladder. Oh, look at that. I've got tights in my ladder. This song is called The Ladder Song. Dave, hit the music, please. Everybody has wishes, everybody has hopes. Some are small like dishes, some are big like boats. All I ever wanted since the day I was born is to have my own ladder. Then one day in the post a box arrived at the door, and inside was this ladder, all I dreamt of and more. So without hesitation I said, cheerio floor, and then everyone saw me. Go up my ladder, 1 step, I've done it. Go up my ladder, 2 steps, I've done it. Go up my ladder, 3 steps, I've done it. Now I'm on the summit. As I stood at the top, I saw the beautiful view, and my friends were all waving, so I waved to them too. But the weirdest thing happened when I saw them all smile. I began to get lonely. You see, the top of my ladder wasn't nice anymore. I was up there alone, my friends were all on the floor. They were having a party and I couldn't join in, so I made my decision. Go down my ladder, 1 step, I've done it. Go down my ladder, 2 steps, I've done it. Go down my ladder, 3 steps, I've done it. Now I'm back where I began it. My ladder! Thank you very, very much for staying. Thank you very much.